So I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Nature NB works and gathers on the traditional territories of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, and Passamaquoddy territories. And my name is Alicia, and I'm the Education Coordinator at Nature NB. We also have Lauren and Katrina, our nature educators, joining us, and Jenna, our Engagement Coordinator. Welcome to the participants that are here and also those that will be viewing at a later time. The webinar is going to last approximately an hour and a half with 3 20-minute sections and then a period for questions afterwards. So any questions that you have during the course of the webinar, feel free to write in the chat, and then we'll address those after each section. And before I hand this over, I'd just like to introduce everyone to Alessandro, who's the Mission Monarch Program Coordinator. Mission Monarch coordinates the Canadian participation in the International Monarch Monitoring Blitz, which is an initiative from the Tri-National Monarch Conservation Network. And with that said, I'm going to turn my video and microphone off and hand it over to Alessandro.
Great, thank you very much. So just to be sure, is everybody seeing my presentation in full screen? And can you see my dot moving around while I do the presentation? And just a little sign from you, Alicia.
Yeah, I think we're all good for that.
Perfect.
I don't see anything indicating otherwise in the chat either. So
great, thank you. So yeah, like Alicia mentioned, I'm Alessandro Dieni. I'm the program coordinator of Mission Monarch, and I'll be hosting this workshop for the next hour and a half. Just before starting with the syllabus, I just want to say that I'm really excited and happy to be with people from New Brunswick. That's the kind of outreach that we're trying to do every year. The program exists since 2016, and we have mainly concentrated our efforts in the Quebec region, Ontario also. So we're really happy to be in the Maritimes for the first time. So a big thank you all for being interested in the program and in this training of head of missions. So I'm just going to talk about the syllabus of this workshop. The first block we'll be talking about everything that you need to know with the monarch. So some of you are really comfortable with the idea of monarchs, but we'll have a little bit more information about its population, the decline of the population, the biology, and also the other populations that you can find. In the second block, we'll talk more about the program itself and how you can use it and the role that you'll be having since you're following this workshop. And lastly, the last block, we're doing a kind of a mission, because we say Mission Monarch, but it's also what we do with the program. We're going out on a mission to find milkweed and identifying monarchs on them. So we're gonna do a short mission with you all, so you'll feel comfortable using the tools that we're offering you. So we're starting off with the monarchs. Where can we find them? Monarchs population are found in many countries, including Australia, New Zealand, some Pacific islands such as Hawaii, and they are also present in Europe, mostly Western Europe and the north of Africa also. However, the monarch is indigenous to North America, so I'll be talking more about the two populations that we can find in North America. Here they are. We have one that is located in the western part of North America that we call the Western population, and we have another population that is called Eastern population because it's located eastern to the Rocky Mountains. Why we're talking populations, they're not that different genetically. However, they have different breeding sites, and that's why we're making a difference between the Western population and the Eastern population. And the Eastern population, they'll go across Canada and the US, and they'll go back to Mexico to overwinter, where the Western population, they will go up to BC and stay along the Pacific coast in the US and Canada, but they will overwinter mainly in the state of California. Now, when we're talking about monarchs, it's a butterfly that has a complete metamorphosis. They have 4 distinct stages throughout their lives. I'm presenting them to you now. We have egg, caterpillars, a chrysalis, and then after a butterfly. I'm not going too much into the detail now because I'll be sharing more pictures of all these stages later on in the presentation. But know that for a monarch to complete all of his life stages, it takes around 1 month, depending on the weather. I cannot speak about the life stages of the monarch without talking about the milkweed, because it is essential for the development of the monarch. It is the sole food source of the caterpillars. Adults, they can feed on many species of flowers that are rich in nectar. However, for the caterpillar, they're only feeding on milkweed plants to develop. So here are some characteristics of milkweeds. One thing that you can notice about that plant is they have a latex that is a milky fluid produced for protection. So when they're being attacked by insects or other animals, or they have been wounded in some way, they will ooze latex from their wounds, and that latex that is at first liquid will become more solid over time when it's in contact with the air. So that's a, how can I say, a physical property of the latex, but there's also a chemical property because they have inside them a certain molecule, a chemical compound that is called cardenolides. And that is serving the plants as a defense because it is toxic, and most of the animals that when they eat cardenolides, they will react to it and they will not be feeling well. So it will harm them, in other words. It happened to cattle that even when they were feeding intensely on milkweed, they died from poisoning. While that being said, it's not dangerous for humans. And it would be dangerous if you eat a lot of milkweed, but I don't think anybody can persevere through that. The only thing that can happen to humans is only having skin rashes when being in contact with milkweed. And then again, it's only when you're a lot in contact with that plant, such as entomologists that works in the fields, or I'm going to say farmers or horticulturists. So people that do a few missions around the year, they're not going to be reacting with milkweed normally, unless they have some kind of allergy. But that being said, it's not only useful for the plant itself. The cardenolides become useful for the monarch also, because the caterpillars can accumulate these compounds in their bodies. And it's not only the caterpillars, also the monarch butterfly will contain cardenolides. I'm always hesitating to share the famous pictures of the blue jay eating a monarch butterfly and then vomiting afterward, because it's not nice to see, but that is a proof of how the cardenolides within the monarch caterpillar or the adult butterfly will also be toxic for predators. So that's something, a characteristic for the milkweed, but the monarch use it now to be for protection also. Now we're going back to the milkweed again. Another particularity about milkweeds, it's their fruits and their seeds. Their fruits are normally or commonly called pods, and they have a they're strange to look at, but I'll give you more details further in the presentation. But also the seeds are really interesting. They possess silky air that we call floss, and that's helping them to disseminate with the wind. But also the floss of the seeds are also used industrially in the past 10 years for for clothing or to isolate from sound or from the weather. So it's also something interesting for humans in a sense when they're trying to commercially produce items with silk hairs. So now I've talked about main characteristic of milkweeds. I'm talking about now the two species that you might find naturally in New Brunswick. The first is the common milkweed. It is also a milkweed commonly found in Quebec and Ontario and all the other provinces of the Maritimes. It is mainly that milkweed that you will find also in more developed areas, so such as cities or gardens or I'm going to say unmaintained sites. For the habitat, I'll speak about that a little bit more later in the presentation. However, for the swamp milkweed, the other species of milkweed that you might find naturally in New Brunswick, it's a little bit different. They prefer more wetlands, such as marshes, ditches, banks of rivers, streams, or lakes. And they are also often more scattered. They're not having as much dense colonies as the common milkweed and the other milkweeds that we find in North America. However, you can also find other species of milkweeds in gardens or in more developed areas, such as ornamental milkweed. One of them is bloodflower, which is usually used in garden because of their red and yellow flowers that are really, really showy and people like a lot. And there's also a plant called a milkweed called balloon plant that is also a tropical milkweed that you can find in gardens. And just before the meeting, I haven't put a picture of Asclepias tuberosa, that is also a milkweed that can be found into gardens, but know that on our website, all the milkweeds that you might find in Canada are listed, and there's also ID sheets to identify them correctly. So we've talked about the life cycle of the monarch. Now we're talking about its annual cycle. As you may all know, the monarch is a great migrator. He does a round trip between Mexico and Canada in 4 to 5 generations. So we'll dig in a little bit more in that in a few seconds, but I'll take a time to show you also what I've talked earlier with the Western population being being located west of the Rocky Mountains. As you can see with the arrows, they do a much smaller migration during the year round, mainly a little bit inland or up north, but going back to the coast of California. I will be giving more information in that segment about the Eastern population. That is a more, how can I say, impressive migration, since they're going from Mexico to the southern part of Canada, or even all the Maritimes provinces. So now we're going to start the journey from Mexico. Monarchs gather there for overwintering from November to March. And when the spring arrives, they're going to start migrating up north. So that's the butterflies that overwintered all winter long. They will starting to go up north in the northern part of Mexico or the southern part of the US. And if they haven't mated in Mexico, they will mate there, and they will lay their first eggs in these regions. And they will complete then after their life cycle, and from egg to caterpillars to chrysalis and then to monarch again. And those monarchs will be the first generation of that year. Then again, those monarchs will go up north, mate, and also lay eggs, and they will continue till they reach our latitudes in Canada. Notice that the butterfly that flies from Mexico to reproduce, soon after that, it will die, and the new butterfly that the first generation butterfly will go up north. It will live only about 1 month to migrate up north, and reproduce, and then after it will die also. So the lifespan of monarchs during that period, it's around 1 month. So it takes 1, 2, or maybe 3 generations for monarchs to get to the northern part of their breeding range. Now, when the summer arrives and they're all across the northern part of the US and the southern part of Canada, they will still have 1 or maybe 2 generations where they will feed on, the adults will feed on flowers, mate and lay eggs on the caterpillars, and they will do that, as I said, across the summer. However, the butterflies that will emerge at the end of the summer, towards late August or early September, they will do something else. They will not be able to reproduce. They're called immatures sexually, so they will keep that energy to another purpose that will be flying back to Mexico. So all of the butterflies that are emerging late in the summer, they will only feed on plants for nectar. They will not mate, and they will fly directly to Mexico. And that is more than 4,000 kilometers of travel that they will do in a few months. They do not do it in only one flight. They will stop at some places to get some nectar, to get some water also, but still it is an important travel that they'll be doing. And it's also those butterflies that will stay in Mexico for all the winter. So there will be also overwintering. That seems a lot longer than what they'll be doing during the summer, and it's true, those butterflies, the migrating butterflies of autumn, will live for a period of 8 months before they will die. So they will go to Mexico, and a little bit further up on the next year, it's the generation that goes back in the northern part of Mexico and southern part of the US the year after. But when they're in Mexico, it's a magnificent sight. It's where there are millions of them that are on trees to spend all winter long. And that is why they will go in a certain state where they're not gonna lose some energy. They want to have a fresh environment that is not too cold, but still not too hot. And that's why they're all concentrated in those mountains in central Mexico, because it's a kind of forest with a specific condition that is perfect for monarchs to overwinter. That is when scientific started to evaluate also to measure the density of the population of monarchs. Since they're all gathered in the same place, they were able to evaluate the area of occupancy of the monarch butterflies in those overwintering sites in Mexico. It started off in the early 1990s, and it went well for a few years, but then in 1960 was the last year where the population seemed to be important. Since then, we came across an important decline of the population of the monarchs in Mexico. It's considered more than 80% of a loss of population. We reached an all-time low in 2013. Since then, population seems to go back up again a little bit. We had a major increase in 2018, but in 2019, we had a drop of 53% compared to the previous year. So we are still trying to help the monarch, and all the efforts that we are deploying are important because the population is still at a critical level here in Canada, and when it's observed in Mexico as well. So the causes of those declines, there are many causes. Since they're present in all North America during their existence on a year round, there can be many factors explaining why they are declining. Here I'm presenting three major causes. The first one is the agricultural landscape and modern practices. At our latitudes, this is the major cause of decline. Before having large monoculture agriculture in Canada and in the Midwest of the US, we had natural prairies with a lot of milkweeds, but also a lot of nectaring plant or rich nectar plants. While having now cultures that are only breeding one kind of plant, there's less space for milkweeds. There's also less space for all nectaring plants that are essential for the adult monarch, the butterfly. But not only that, the quality of the milkweed and the quality of the nectaring plants are also declining because there's herbicides that are used in those regions and also insecticides. So all of that agricultural approach and landscape is causing a decline in monarchs, and that's affecting it during the summer at our latitudes. The second cause is climate change. As for many species, as you may know, for the monarch, it's more the extreme weather condition that can be a problem. If there's more hurricanes during their migration back to Mexico, it can have really a disastrous effect on their population. But not only that, if we have more dry years, the milkweeds and the nectaring plants will be also less of good quality for the monarchs. And in Mexico, if we are having colder winters or hotter winters, though the level of survival of the monarchs can be declining also. Lastly, one of the problems that we can encounter in Mexico is the logging of the forest in which they overwinter. So, like I've said, it's really specific condition that they're trying to seek to overwinter. So, if we're logging in those forests, there's less space for the monarchs. And not only that, if they're being more, those forests are more scattered, the conditions are going to be different, and we risk to have higher rates of mortality for the monarchs during their overwintering period. So that closes our first block when I was speaking about the monarchs. So we can take maybe a short break and see if people have a few questions.
So if anyone wants to write in their questions in the comments, I can read them out. I'll start with a question of mine. I'm curious to know when you start seeing monarchs in Quebec.
For us, this year we had monarchs at the end of May and early June. That's the first time we saw monarchs.
Wow, that's quite a bit earlier than we're seeing them.
Okay.
I think the first reports of monarchs this year in New Brunswick were like mid-July.
Oh.
Yeah.
But the thing is, what is really particular for this year? I said for Quebec, it's late May, early June, but we had our first sightings of monarchs in Montreal, and we have a large fan base of people monitoring for monarchs. We had it only late July also. It's been mid-July, excuse me. So it was really later in Montreal compared to the other regions of southern Quebec. And what is behind that, we believe they're following a strange corridors of migration that they're not normally using in past years. Is it because it's drier? We don't know, but we've observed that some regions we had monarchs earlier in the past years. But now the thing is with the program, we will be able to trace the different first observations of monarchs towards the later years, and we'll see what will be more of a mean of observation. Yeah.
That's interesting. So in the map that we saw a few slides earlier with them coming up from Mexico to Eastern Canada, it isn't as much of a straight shot then as it looks. Like they're potentially following kind of a curved route.
Yeah, probably. And that's why tagging is important. And there's also another approach that is more using I don't know how to say in English, but they're analyzing the content of the monarch for some elements. isotope
Oh,
elements.
isotopes.
Yeah,
Isotopes.
exactly. So that's a better way to learn where the monarch went, and that new approach will give more answers to our questions.
Well, that's fascinating. Does anyone else have any questions before we move on to the next section? Can wait for a couple of seconds here.
I have maybe one question. When you say mid-July, is it for each year, is it around mid-July, or is it particularly late this year?
I think that it's been pretty consistently around this time. Yeah, around like the second week of July. Jenna, do you know if is that also what your understanding is throughout New Brunswick?
Yeah, that's what the Southern New Brunswick Monarch Watchers reported. It's like you might see a few coming in like June, but yeah, by this point there should be lots of eggs to be found.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
So it doesn't look like anyone else has questions for this section, so I'll mute myself again and hand this back over to you.
Great, thank you. So now we're digging up the second block, which is the Mission Monarch program. As I've mentioned in one of my last slides, the population of the monarchs dramatically declined. So it's important to do something with this threatened insect. So in Canada, we have a committee that is called the COSEWIC, the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada. It's an independent advisory panel of the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada that meets twice a year to assess the status of the wildlife species at risk of extinction. So in 1997, they listed the monarch butterfly as a species of special concern, and 2004, the Canada added the monarch to the SARA list, just to be sure, the species at risk act for the government. Till then, the status of the monarch has been reviewed a few times, but in 2016, not long after the big decline that they had, the lower point that they've reached, the COSEWIC stated that the monarch is now considered endangered in Canada. And that is mainly because some of the causes that I've presented to you earlier, they're still really present and active, and there's nothing that suggests that they're going to be less of importance in the next years. So we believe that if those causes still drives the diminution of the population of monarchs, they are at risk of being to disappear from Canada or elsewhere in North America. So even if the status in Canada at the SARA did not change, the government came in and decided to take action with the monarch. They've decided to, they've committed to protecting these butterflies as summer breeding grounds as a way of maximizing their reproductive success. But while they wanted to protect these breeding grounds, they realized that we in Canada don't have enough scientific knowledge to do so. We cannot come up with an effective conservation plan to protect the monarch. And that is why the Mission Monarch program appeared in the landscape of the conservation of monarch, because they realized that it would have been really expensive and time consuming to have a lot of biologists or scientists going outside having data. And they said, we can switch our approach and having citizens that can participate in these activities to share data and have more information on the breeding grounds of monarchs in Canada. And also the Mission Monarch program is an adaptive program that documents mainly the reproductive success of the monarch. As you may know, there's many other programs that exist, and they've existed for a longer time than Mission Monarch in the US. They had some surveying of monarchs and monitoring of milkweed also. They had tagging, but as we know at the moment, there's no other program in Canada that assess the reproductive success of the monarch at our latitudes. And to do so, the Mission Monarch program is quite simple. To make an observation, you have to follow 4 easy steps. First step is to find milkweed. Then, when you found some milkweed, you can verify the presence of monarch on the plants you found. You write your observation and you share them on a website. So before continuing, what is particularly citizen science? It's when scientific research is primarily conducted by non-professional volunteers. So that's why education is the key of the success of such programs and of such scientific project. For Mission Monarch, we are having different tools to educate the public. One of them is our website. You can go on the website. There's other tools on it for knowing better for learning more about the monarch and learning more about the milkweed also. And there's other ID sheets that you can download or that you can use while doing your mission. So there's a lot of tools on the website. Mission Monarch does also a lot of general public education to educate citizens and also promote the program. Those are mainly activities that are being held outside during the summer. Sadly, this year there's not so many activities given the context, but we're shifting our approach more on an online-based activities. We also have an educational kit that is also in English and in French for teachers that want to include the monarch conservation content in their activities in elementary school. This educational kit is more adapted for the objectives of the Ministry of Education of Quebec. It can be adapted to maybe other provinces as well. It's like I've said, it's aiming more children's around the 3rd, 4th, or 5th year of elementary school, and there's a scenario that the teachers can use to implement in their courses. So that's also available on our website. And finally, we do a lot of trainings of multipliers that we call heads of mission. That's a little bit what we're trying to do today. So we're giving all those informations and those tools to people that are really interested in helping the monarch and participating in its conservation. And those multipliers are normally leaders in their community. So I am the only coordinator in Canada. I cannot go everywhere. So being in contact with people that can be active in their community, that's what we're trying to do with heads of missions. And how can you be a leader afterwards? It's by promoting the program and organizing missions with a small group of people or larger group if the COVID context stops eventually. But also what is really interesting with the heads of mission is you can also train new participants. So that is something that we really encourage people to do. Here in Quebec, it's starting to be a little bit more fluid. We have groups of naturalists that organize mission and do the same thing that I do to promote the program and to outreach a higher number of people. So the roles of the heads of mission is really important in the success of the program, but also in the success of the conservation of the monarch. And that brings me to the International Monarch Monitoring Blitz. It starts tomorrow, July 24th, and it ends on August 22nd. And the objective of such Monarch Blitz is for taking a snapshot of milkweed and monarch presence across the breeding range during the summer. So by doing so, you will participate with thousands of volunteers across North America to take a snapshot of the monarch population. So people from Canada will participate, the US, and also Mexico. But the thing is, it's also the best time to make some observation of monarchs. earlier in the year, you might find milkweed, but with no monarch butterflies, with no eggs. But later in the season, end of July and early August, it's normally a good time for people to see all stages of the monarchs outside when they do observation. So I really hope that by giving that that workshop, that people can be active and promoting the program during this time frame. But doing Mission Monarchs before and after the Blitz is still really important. It's just not it's not an international Blitz outside of these dates, but still every observation at any time is quite welcomed. So that was a little bit quicker. That was our second block, the end of the second block. That's more directed towards our program. We can take a small break and have a few questions if you like.
So again, if anyone wants to write in their questions into the comment section, I can read them out. Alessandro, I wonder if you can go back to the last slide, just to the map of
Yes.
observations during 2019. And to just point out, it looks like New Brunswick might have like one or two, depending on where the actual border is to Nova Scotia and Quebec.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but it's exciting this year that, you know, that we're gonna get some more orange dots on there for next year, so that hopefully the map will look a lot different next year.
But seriously, as of this year, I have a lot of observation coming from New Brunswick, which wasn't the case in the latest years. So I'm really hopeful that this year's Blitz will have it's gonna be, I hopefully as orange as here, but in New Brunswick, that would be pretty nice.
Yeah,
But,
let's aim for that. We
but there's a
definitely
lot.
have a lot of folks who love monarchs here, so
Great.
it's just connecting with the mission itself.
But what I want to add is that those dots are not solely observations of monarchs. Some of these dots, it's missions that have been made by people who found milkweed but didn't find monarchs. And that is something that is really important for our program, is that doing a mission, the first step is to find milkweed, and you can share data on our website even if you don't encounter monarchs. And that is why we want to have a scattered observation. So even if you don't see that much monarchs, adults, caterpillars, or eggs, you still can do some missions and just sharing data of the presence of milkweeds. So yeah, really hopefully there will be more points on that map this year.
That's a good question to bring up. So you're saying too that if any participants in the International Blitz go out, they find their milkweed field, and they survey the entire thing, but they don't come up with any eggs or any caterpillars, not to just go home and say, oh, well, we tried, but to actually submit that data, because it's just as important knowing where they're not as knowing where they are.
Exactly. So having 0 monarchs is helpful information. It's data still, even if there's no monarch.
So we actually have a couple of other questions that have come in. Question, what types of projects use the data collected from monarch missions?
For now, the Mission Monarch program just it's a 5 years old program. There's not so many projects that use our data specifically, but still it can be. We had one student that did master's degrees based on the sightings of monarchs and milkweed in the Ontario region. So it can be a starting point for a new research. If they're not aware of where are the hotspots of milkweed, they can use those kind of data to do so. We've been contacted this year also by some government entities that want to conserve locations in Quebec. So they know that the program is collecting data across all Canada, but also Quebec, and they want to use that to I would say cibler in French, to locate hotspots to protect monarchs. So it can be used by the scientific community to do some research, but also for conservation purposes.
And another question, are monarchs also prone to invasive species?
If it's a milkweed species, they will lay eggs and feed on them. So that's why I presented the ornamental species of milkweeds. But to answer that question, I don't believe that there's invasive milkweeds in Canada. It's more of a problems that we encounter in the US. There are some species, tropical species of milkweeds that are now being how can I say, naturally established in the US. And the thing is, they don't have a cycle like the indigenous species. They stay there all year long. So sometimes the monarch can lose their migration reflex, if I may say it that way. So invasive species, yes, if those are milkweeds, Asclepias genera, but I don't think it's that common in Canada, as of what I know. I don't know if it answers the questions clearly.
I think so. Are there any invasive species that you know of that like are threatening like the butterflies or the caterpillars themselves rather than?
Oh, okay. Not that I know of. Normally, because since they're really specialists, they feed the caterpillar feeds solely on milkweed. There is no invasive species where I think the monarch lay eggs and that the caterpillar cannot feed on it. That would be a evolutionary trap. That there's no such species in Canada at the moment or in the US. And even if they're invasive species, if they have if they're rich in nectar, they might even help. Sadly, it's sad to say, but that can help the monarchs in a sense. So I don't know of any plant that present a threat for the monarchs or the larvae at the moment.
Well, I think that's good to know. I think they have enough threatening them already.
Yes,
Good that that's
exactly.
not something they have to worry about. Okay, so I think that's it for questions, unless anyone wants to get a last question in for this section. And it doesn't look like anyone's typing, so I'll mute myself again and you can take it away.
Great, thank you. So now for the third block, we're going to go out in our computer on a mission. So just before doing so, I just want to remind that the Mission Monarch website, mission-monarch.org, is a website that is in French, English, and Spanish. And there's a lot of content that you can look into, and you can even download. One of the most interesting sections for people that wants to do some missions and to verify the presence of milkweed and the butterfly, the monarch butterfly. There's a page called the Mission Kit where you can download a field observation form, monarch identification sheet, milkweed ID sheets, and also the commonly confused species that can look alike the monarch caterpillars or the monarch butterfly. And there's also a guide for the other species that you might find on the milkweed. So the Mission Kit is a nice kit to download and to use when you want to do some missions. So like I've mentioned earlier, it's quite simple, it's really fun, it's 4 easy steps, and normally even children that go to elementary school are able to follow these 4 steps. So first thing to do is to find milkweed. So where to find them? I've said that for the swamp milkweed, it's quite different than the other species. They're mainly in more wetlands habitats. But for the other species of milkweeds, they prefer sunny and disturbed sites with poor or dry soil. So in natural habitat, that will be field, prairies, or forest edges. However, they are also found in more, how can I say, developed area, with the same kind of condition, with sunny open spaces, with disturbed sites. So we can find them near roads, near railways, or unmaintained area. In cities, when you have buildings that are not being that much taken care of, you can see a lot of milkweed, especially the common milkweed, grow around. But also you can find them in gardens, because now people are a little bit more sensitive with the problem of the monarch. So they are planting different species of milkweeds in their gardens, and those are great habitat to observe monarchs. So every people that has a garden with milkweed, they have a great spot to do some mission. They can go early in the summer, even if there's no monarchs that are present, just to locate if milkweed is growing this year. They can look, they can note their observation and upload it on the site. So even if it's not a natural habitat, we are really interested in having those kind of observations. So even gardens, community gardens or private gardens are spot that we want to have infos on it. And as for milkweeds, they're not always flowering. So this is what milkweed can look like when it goes out from the ground. I know that in Quebec and Montreal, from early May, mid-May, you're starting to see milkweed growth. I don't know in BC at what time it is. I would be interested to know what's the phenology in your region, but that we can see those kind of growth in mid-May, early June. Afterwards, we can easily find flowers of milkweeds, and normally for people that are less comfortable identifying the species, the flower gives a good idea. Those two pictures are of common milkweeds with the pale pink or mauve flower. For the other species, you can follow our, you can look into our ID guides to see what different color of flower you can encounter while doing missions. But also what can help identifying the plant is the fruit and the seeds. That's going to be later in the season. The fruits are going to be large, spindle-shaped fruit. They are also bumpy and downy. And the seeds, that's really later in the season. You will see the seeds with their silky hair, the floss attached to them. That's when the fruit opens itself later on the season. So for the fruits that are greenish this way, I know that in Quebec we can find those big fruits around August and September, and late September and October, or even furthermore, we can see those fruits that are open and dried up. Also, just to let you know, if you go in a different site that you're not used to go, and you see that kind of milkweed in that state, excuse me, it is still interesting for you to share that data on Mission Monarch. There's not going to be, hopefully there's not going to be monarchs or caterpillars on that plant, but it's still another spot of milkweed that we are interested in knowing of. So every stages of the milkweeds, if they have monarchs or not, you can share that data on the website. Now for the monarch, those are the 4 stages that I've presented earlier. When you see the egg, now you have a better idea of what I'm talking about. You can see the cream-colored or yellowish egg that is oval shaped with slightly conical, and it's covered in longitudinal raised ridges. Sorry for that. It's even rough for me to say in French, so in English it's quite difficult. But yeah, there's some lines that starts from the bottom of the egg to the top of the eggs. That is something really characteristic of the egg of monarchs. On the next photo, I show something that you have to be careful with. Sometimes you can see eggs, but also drops of latex. So you have to be careful. That is the egg. You can see the lines and not that many. You can't see the cone shape of it, from that angle, but you can see the little marks on the egg. But the other thing that you see is not an egg, it's a drop of latex. So that is something that we tell people about, to be careful when they're doing surveys on milkweeds. And also to give you an idea of the size of the egg, that's a finger, and the egg of the monarch is just next to it here. So while verifying the presence of monarchs, you can see also caterpillars on the milkweeds. Maybe you've looked at first at the bottom picture with the caterpillars with their yellow, black, and white stripes. They also have large and black filaments near their heads and the tip of their abdomen. Depending on the size and the stage of the caterpillars, those filaments or these colors can be less important. That's why I've put the picture up high. Maybe you hadn't noticed, but when you zoom in, there's a little larvae, and that caterpillar just came out from the egg. So that's its first snack. The first snack of the caterpillar is the shell of the egg in which he was for a few days. And as you can see, there is no stripes of colors and no filaments near the head or the abdomen. So for the first stage of the monarch, it can be a little bit more difficult for someone that's not used to identifying the monarch. However, there's not so many other caterpillars that can look like that on milkweeds. But still, they can be confused with other specimens. Here is the black swallowtail, the caterpillar of the black swallowtail. You can note that there's no filaments, and also there's no yellow stripes, only yellow dots or spots. So that's the main way that you can make the difference between the monarch and the black swallowtail caterpillar. Also, normally when people say, oh, I think I saw a monarch caterpillar, and they're seeing a black swallowtail, they're seeing the black swallowtail caterpillar on a different plant than milkweed, because black swallowtail caterpillars do not feed on milkweed. So that's also a trick to identifying the right specimen of caterpillars. However, on milkweeds, you will find the milkweed tiger moth that can, at that stage, it doesn't that much look alike, but still, since it's on the milkweed, people can mistake them for monarch caterpillars. But then they are covered of tufts of black, white, and yellow hair, when the monarch doesn't have that kind of hair on their body. Also, they tend to congregate in groups. So that is a behavior that is really particular to the milkweed tiger moth, and it's not something that you will find with the monarch caterpillar. Monarch caterpillars are normally alone on a milkweed plant. Sometimes they can be a little bit more, especially if there are not so many milkweeds, and that a female decided to lay more than one egg on the plant, but having more over 30 caterpillars on a plant, that's not a behavior that is common for the monarch. That's really attributed for the milkweed tiger moth. Now I'm showing you the magnificent chrysalis of the monarch butterfly. It's turquoise green with gold spots on them, but that's not always the case. When you go further in the development of the chrysalis, you will gradually get darker colors that will be the same as the adults. So the black, the yellow, the orange, excuse me, and the white spots will clearly show through the chrysalis. And normally you're from 1 to 2 days before the emergence of a monarch butterfly. So if you're lucky to have that kind of chrysalis in your garden, go see day after day, and maybe you will be able to see a monarch emerging from the chrysalis. And Lucy, I want to take your attention on where they can be found. This piece of something is not milkweed, and it's not even a plant. So sometimes the last stage of the caterpillar of monarchs will not make their chrysalis on a milkweed plant. They will walk around, maybe doing it on another plant or even on another structure. So when you're when you're doing missions for Mission Monarch, when you're looking at milkweed and you're finding large caterpillars, you can also look around to see if there's not chrysalis around those patches. Now for this part, we're going to talk about the adults. Excuse me. So those are two monarchs. One of them is a female, the other is a male. So this is a trick to distinguish them. The male butterfly has black spots on his hind wings, whereas the female doesn't have those kind of black spots. That's the trick to distinguish the male from the female. But also you maybe observe that the black veins on the female butterfly is thicker and darker than the veins on the male butterfly. So this is also a trick to distinguish male from female. Also, it is possible to sometimes being confused with monarchs and other species. Here is a picture of a Visoroi that is really mimicking the monarch. The trick to distinguish the Visoroi from the monarch is the black line running through the hind wing. That the line here is shown on the hind wing of the Visoroi, but it's not showing on the monarch. But also a trick when you're a little bit more experimented, it's the size. Monarch butterflies are huge. There can be around 10 centimeters of wingspan, where the wingspan of the Visoroi is around 6 to 7 centimeters. So when you see a small monarch, sometimes it is simply a Visoroi. Since insects normally they always have the same size across generation. There's a lot of other species that people might mistake a monarch with. That's why we have a commonly confused ID sheet on our website. Now I'm just showing the pictures so you can see the difference of the color patterns and yeah, the color of the abdomen also. But if you download that commonly confused ID sheet from our website, there will be more details on how to distinguish the monarch from the other species. One other thing also, it's always the size. The monarch tends to be bigger than all of those species. There's maybe the Canadian tiger swallowtail that is also a big butterfly, but normally the monarch is one of the biggest. And just to conclude that part of surveying for monarchs, when you look at milkweed plants, if you're not going close to the plant and you're not turning the leaves, you can think that there's nothing on them. So that's why it's important to go close and turning all the leaves that you're going to be inspecting. And there you can have a nice surprise. You can see caterpillars or even eggs of the monarchs. There's not only the leaves that you have to be careful turning to see what's under them. It's also important to look at the flowers and at the fruits of the milkweed plants. So when you're surveying for monarchs, don't be shy getting close to the plant, carefully moving the plant around or the leaves around. Same thing for the fruits and the flowers. That's the best way that you will find monarchs on them. Not only caterpillars. I know I'm showing pictures of caterpillars on the flowers and on the fruit. However, eggs can be laid also on the flowers and on the fruit. It's more rare on the fruit because you're later in the season, but still it's important to look out all the structures of the milkweed. Now for the field observation form, when you're writing your observation, you don't necessarily have to have that form with you, but it is important to know what is the data that we want you to collect and to share. So the place, the date, the starting time, and the ending time of the mission is something that we want to know. You can then put the number of milkweeds plant that you have, milkweed stems that you've examined, and the number of caterpillars, the total number of caterpillars that you've encountered on these stems. Also, you can note the number of eggs, number of chrysalis, and the number of adults. And at the end, just for giving us an idea of the spot that you've visited, you can see the size of the site and the milkweed density on that site. You just have to check them, and when you enter that on our website, it's the same categories that you will see. I just want to bring your attention to that section, which is the milkweed species. If you encounter more than one species, for example, in a garden, you have common milkweed and another species of ornamental milkweed. You will have one sheet for each species that you are inspecting. So if you have 10 stems of common milkweeds, you put 10 there, you put the number of caterpillars, and you have a different sheet for the other ornamental milkweed or other indigenous milkweed that you encounter naturally. So it's always one field observation form for one species of milkweed. Now it's the last part. To complete your mission, you will have to go on our website. You have to sign up if you don't have an account, which is fairly easy. You just have to provide a username, a password with an email, and a few more informations. And then afterwards, you'll be able to sign in at our website and to click on our submit data button, and you'll be prompted to that page. So they'll be asking you, for instance, it was my account. So they say, hey, welcome Alessandro, you're back from a mission. Do you want to give your mission form? And if I click on that, I can give all the information that I have collected while I was on mission. We have another way of submitting data. That is more it's following more the trend of the iNaturalist application or program. That is when you're maybe just walking around, you're doing something, you're working maybe, and you're seeing a monarch flying by. You cannot stop what you're doing and to look around if there's milkweed. So you can share, you can still share that information with us by clicking on the flash data icon here. It's the same thing for caterpillars or chrysalis. If you're seeing a caterpillar on a milkweed plant, but you cannot access all the spot because there's too many milkweed, you can just go on the flash data and say you saw one caterpillar or one chrysalis. It's not the complete form of a mission form. Still, it is interesting data to share, but no, it's really important that following the protocol of a real mission monarch will give more information because we're correlating the number of stems of milkweeds with the presence or the absence of monarchs. So the first way to share data is more complete, but still any data is interesting for us, and you can share them following a more simpler protocol and a more simple way to share those data. And also on that page, you'll have your profile. So if you send data and you've made an error, you can go on your profile and modify your observation, and also change your password or the email address that you've prompted for your profile. So when it's done, you've sent your data, you will have a mission detail of your data. That's a mission that I did in Montreal in a community garden in the downtown Outremont. So you'll have the date, all the information. You'll have the adults, chrysalis and egg that you've encountered. Sadly, I haven't encountered any monarchs, any caterpillars neither, but I have seen 62 stems of milkweeds. So that's still is a pertinent observation to share on our website. And when I've shared this data, I'm sharing with a lot of other people that are sharing. Those are all the spots where missions have occurred since the creation of the website since 2016. And hopefully this is something New Brunswick, Moncton, or other cities in New Brunswick, Aristiguche, Caraquet, there's going to be all those observation in those cities also. It will be really a fun thing to compare in the next few years to see if there's a lot of participation in your region. So that's the end of the presentation. And thanking you all for being here. I'm really happy that I've been able to reach out to people in New Brunswick, and still I have time for any questions if you have them. Thank you very much.
Well, great. Thanks so much, Alessandro. I actually have a question while we're waiting for any more to come in potentially. You had a photo of a chrysalis where the monarch had already emerged. If someone found something like that on one of their missions, would you record that as a chrysalis being found, or do you only want instances where the butterfly is still in that stage?
It's a really good question. Sadly, our internet site is not, you don't have the option to say that the chrysalis is empty. Excuse me, you can put it in the comment section if it's empty, but I think it's interesting to note that there, at some point, there were a monarch present at that place. It's like I said, we're collecting data, and then the scientists that will use them will have to filter the information. So having one chrysalis at the moment, maybe later in the season, that could be confusing. But giving more information in the comment section, it will be really appreciated. So me, if I encountered a chrysalis, an empty chrysalis, like you've said, I will say that I have found one. But in the comment section, I will put that this chrysalis was empty at the date that I am sending this information.
Okay, that's good to know. Another question, would we complete a different observation form for each milkweed patch along the same hiking trail? So I think that's oftentimes we're seeing milkweed like along one trail, and it might be kind of the whole length. So where do we kind of decide where one patch ends and another begins, or how do we quantify that kind of?
That's a really good question. That's a question coming from someone that has a little bit more knowledge in the in the research, because yeah, how do we define a parcel, a spot? It's not that easy. For the program, it can be only one. If you if maybe you say we've done one mission and we had a high number of milkweeds, you can say in the comments that we followed the trail for X distance, and it will show it. That will show also on the time of the start and the ending of the mission also. So if you start the trail at 9 and you're ending your trail at 11, that is important to show in your observation. So that way we'll know that the site that you've walk through was quite long. And just to be sure, I'm gonna show you the observation form. So that maybe it will be more complicated for you to say what kind of site it is, the size of it. You can leave that empty if you wish, and then in the comment just explain that it was on a trail. But yeah, we're trying to have a field observation form that will be how can I say, easy to use for everybody. But that kind of observation is a little bit outside of what the field observation form is offering. But that's why we have a comment section at the moment. And if we have more and more observation on trails, maybe we will adapt our form in the later years. So yeah, for me, you can do it. However, if you want to have different sites each along your trail, you can do it. For me, it's perfect also. It's just that it's gonna ask of you to be more to have more forms to fill in, and more data to share at different times on the internet. So that I leave that for the person who does the observation. If it's only one observation with a long trail, that's fine for us. If you want to split them in small patches, because for you those are patches that make sense, you can do that also.
Okay, that's good to know. And another question that's come in, at this time of year, is it likely that we could see monarchs in each life stage?
That's a good question, and sadly, I would say yes for southern Quebec. I'm not sure for New Brunswick. Normally, you could expect having all stages. What I can try to do is I'm gonna try to exit that that page, and I'm just gonna stop the sharing. And if you have another question, you can ask it. I'm just gonna see on our website what is the stages that we've encountered in New Brunswick at the moment. So to finish that question, I'm just gonna look up the website.
So do you want me to ask another question while you're looking?
Yes, if you can, that would
Okay.
be perfect.
So another question, if someone were to go out and find a huge field of milkweed and they couldn't check every plant, how would you suggest that they go about doing that? How many plants should they check? How should they select the plants that they are checking?
It's since it's community science, we ask people to do the best they can and the most they can. If they want to do all the plants, great. If they want to make only 10 of them, it's still okay. The thing is, it's a protocol that can be followed rigorously, but we're not asking people to be scientists in the field either. So what the people are ready to do, we're really happy with it. Normally, what we say, the more data you provide, the more plant you inspect, it's the best. But sometimes you don't have that much time. But it's better to do a little bit, than do nothing and not sharing anything. So I'm not sure if that helps you with my answer, but you can just tell people that the important is just to do a little bit and to share it at first.
I think that answers the question perfectly. It's
Great.
good. It's good to know that there isn't that pressure on folks if they to just do the best they can and to go out and you know, survey as many as they can, but not feel like they have to do it absolutely perfectly for the data to be usable and valuable.
Exactly. If we want perfect data, we will be paying biologists to do that job. And people are volunteers. They're people that want to help, and every observation are great to have. So I'm asking just people to try the program, and if they can do it and share a little bit of data, even if it's not complete scientific wise, it's still perfect for us. So I'm just gonna filter that. Okay. So at the moment, I have a few. Is everybody still hearing me?
Yep.
Okay, great. At the moment, in New Brunswick, I have 6. Wait, haha. Just to be sure that I'm in only this year. Because there's been mention of eggs on plants, so you may find eggs at this time of the year. Oh no, not this year. Still, we haven't had observation of eggs this year. No, I had observation. Milkweeds. So yeah, we at the moment we have no other stages of the monarch that have been observed. That doesn't mean that there's no eggs or caterpillars at the moment. It's just that it haven't been shared yet for this year. But normally, if you saw butterflies mid-July, I'm pretty sure that you will maybe not chrysalis, but you'll see eggs and you will see caterpillars on the plants if they're there. Like I said, in Montreal, the monarch butterfly is still pretty rare, and we don't have any observation in Montreal where there's caterpillars yet. But elsewhere in Quebec, up north, we have a lot of pictures with caterpillars and chrysalis. So it depends if the monarch's there at the time that you're watching.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I know that we have had people, especially in the kind of like southern half of the province, that have been seeing eggs up until this point. Eggs and obviously the mature butterflies. I'm not sure about caterpillars that haven't been raised by people. But yeah, hopefully we'll see some caterpillars as well.
And that's the only thing apart the Blitz that is complicated to do, because since it's true national, we're trying to have 10 days or a week where we have the most monarchs that are present in all the stages, but depending on where you're located, you're not maybe if higher north in Quebec, they're not going to see caterpillars or chrysalis because they just started to arrive. But still, you can do it later in the season also, and you'll maybe have the chance to see other stages later on, even if it's not during the Blitz. But still, if you're doing observation during that time, you will have at least spots of milkweeds that you're going to share during the Blitz, and that is really, really interesting.
Great. Well, does anyone else have any questions before we finish up here? Let me turn my video back on to sign off and say goodbye to everyone. So it doesn't look like any other questions are coming in. But thank you so much, Alessandro. That was really interesting. And I know I'm really excited to get out there during the International Blitz period and start looking for some eggs and some caterpillars. I know we have milkweed, so that's not such an issue to find, but hopefully, fingers crossed, we see some monarchs too.
Great. And I know that I'm doing a capsule next week in Montreal for telling people what we've done so far in the Blitz. I can share observation from New Brunswick if you want. Maybe that will put some pressure on the people down south. So I can make a little slide with the portion that of what you've shared in New Brunswick during the Blitz.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I'll give you an update then midweek next week to tell you where we're at.
Right, and I know that at the moment the site, our site is 3 lingual, so there's English, French, and Spanish. Sadly, this year with the content that I'm putting on the website, it's mostly in French. But if there's French speakers or French listeners that want to see the capsules, there's something interesting that's going to be shared. And like I said, Thursday next week, the 30th, there's going to be a capsule on what people have done so far, so that can be as interesting for people that want to participate.
We just had a comment come in. Lauren says, thanks so much. This was very helpful. Blitz in Moncton on Saturday. So we'll definitely have that update for you for next Thursday.
Good news. Great.
And we'll be doing some blitzes before then also in Fredericton. So
perfect.
Yeah, we'll get that information to you and put New Brunswick on the map this year for Mission Monarchs International Blitz.
That is wonderful. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thanks so much, everybody. I'll end the call now. Have a great day. Bye.
You too.